Hi, folks. Zach here. Seems like I'm doing a lot of these disclaimers this season. Unfortunately, we ran into a bit of an audio issue for the edit of this episode, where we have about 15 minutes of Mitchell's audio for our discussion, and then it promptly cuts off. Efforts were made to recover this data. Longtime listeners may remember that something like this happened for our discussion of The Sound of Music back in season 2. And in that case, we were able to sort of re record Mitchell's side of the conversation. But now we're all quite a bit older and lead more complicated lives, and there just was not time for that measure this time around. So please enjoy 15 minutes of conversation from Mitchell, and then what I guess is Cookie Pocket's first one-on-one discussion between Christian and I for the rest of the episode. Many apologies for this inconvenience if you're somebody who tunes in for that Mitchell content every week, but please be assured that he will be audible and present for our season finale next week. All right. Thanks, folks. Enjoy the episode. The show's going to be a little different this season.
We are referring to this as game of the game. Well, the game is that there's a hat. In that hat, there are prompts. We do not know what these prompts say.
You and we both don't know what we're going to be talking about next episode. Cookie Pocket, the game of the game.
The game of the game of the game of the game of the game.
The game of the game.
But we're getting ahead of ourselves because we do have to talk about Cocktail before we wrap up the season. I guess a good intro may be to talking about this movie, which Christian found uproariously funny, and I think that Mitchell and I kind of just found bad.
I actually agree with Christian.
Maybe I'm in the minority here, but so what made you go with this for the multi-Razzie winner, Mitchell?
Oh, I had no choices whatsoever. I felt like I had a gun to my head. I could not choose a single thing. Everything looked so horrible. And I was like, certainly the people that, like the council or whoever that decides the fate of the film, surely they've made some mistakes, right? Like they had to have like messed up, or like maybe there's cult classics. It happens all the time, especially with time, or maybe it just takes a certain audience to enjoy it, to bring it back into the limelight, with the internet and everything. It's pretty easy for that to happen now, but doesn't seem like it. So I was like, oh crap, I really like Elizabeth Shue, and I really like Tom Cruise.
Sure.
And I read a lot of reviews about this, probably like top 5, like most amount of reviews I watched or read before a movie. Just because I was really trying. I was really grasping for straws because I did not want this to be a dud. And funny enough, the world works in mysterious ways. I think this was pretty great, like, to talk about.
To talk about, probably.
To talk about is the operating phrase. But yeah, it's I wish we almost saw it in person. Like, this would have been a fantastic film.
This
for
would have
us
been
to
a
watch
lot
together.
more fun in person.
It would have been
at
so
least
much
for
fun.
Yeah, I found this a bit of a slog. Solo on the couch at home, even though there are funny bits and lots of bizarre non sequiturs that make it feel like parts of the movie were written by an alien or like an 80s yuppie.
And it's so like, I mean, critics were really dogging on it, so I still felt like I was taking a risk because, I mean, they were trashing on it pretty hard, across the board. But it made a crap ton of money. It did really well in the box office. So that made me think, like, okay, it can't be like absolutely abhorrent. Like, it has to be watchable, and it very much sits comfortably in where it's like everything is, the right pieces are serviceable, where if things are stupid and don't make sense, that it can be funny. And that's what happened.
Yeah, so you said this won Worst Picture and it won Worst Adapted Screenplay, right?
Sure.
I think those are because I know it's based on a book. The script was written by Haywood Gould,
I forgot
who
that it
adapted
was
it from
about
his
the
own book, who I
Oh
think
my
is a
god.
writer of some repute. This is not necessarily like a nothing screenwriter, and so my guess is that it got worst adapted screenplay. Maybe the Razzies just have worse screenplay. Maybe they don't dither
I
about
think so.
adapted or otherwise. And what I will say is, I worst picture, I always doubt that it's quite the worst picture because, to borrow a phrase, there's always a bigger fish. But this is a pretty bad screenplay. This is I mean, I mentioned in my Letterboxd review that things kind of just happen to Tom Cruise's character, and he just sort of goes along for the ride. This is a man who's capable of developing any skill in the world in the cut between the last shot and the current one. Um, when you think at first it's going to be about, well, he can't find a job in the Big Apple, like every movie character was seemingly trying to do in the 80s. So he's got to get a job at the scuzzy bar, but he's not a bartender. He doesn't know this world. But there's this wise kung fu master bartender, which is kind of how the movie seems to portray him, played by Brian Brown of Breaker Morant fame. Who he's gonna teach him the ropes, and he's gonna learn the awesome art of bartending, and nope, happens in 2 minutes, and he's a great bartender. And then you think, okay, well, and then they get a huge job just thrown into their laps. Just good things continue to happen to Tom Cruise, and I guess we're meant to be pulled along because we like him so much? Question mark. And maybe some of that is that I know Gould said that his original script, the lead character was an older man in like his late 30s, and it was written based on his own experiences being a bartender in New York and struggling in the 30s, in his own 30s, not the 30s, in the Great Depression. And he said he based a lot of it on that, and the script got bought as a Tom Cruise vehicle, and he had to make a lot of changes to make the character younger and make it sort of a sexier script. So maybe some of the conflict is coming from there, but it's a curious experience watching a film with no like tension or suspense, in which a lead character never seems to have to expend any effort to do anything. Even when things are difficult for him, he just has to wait around a little longer until they become easy. That's not an especially involving story to watch. I think the minute I heard it in the movie, I was like, that's an important line. It's going at the beginning of my Letterboxd review, is when his uncle at the beginning of the movie says, most things in life, good or bad, just kind of happen to you, which is 100% what happens to his character in this movie.
Yeah. I can't believe I'm going to defend
Oh
Cocktail
my
slightly.
goodness.
I gave this a 1.
So
by
did
the
I,
way.
yeah.
I don't think the quality is at question here. And in a strange way, knowing that it made so much money and knowing its faults and how pronounced they are, it kind of made me feel better about movies that do really well now that are in their own way sort of patently stupid or obviously critically dogged and deservedly so, like The Housemaid or Anyone But You, or another movie that doesn't star Sydney Sweeney. But I do think at least there's this suggestion that Tom Cruise's character can never rise above the level of bartender. And we do get like a couple of those extremely corny scenes in the classroom where he's trying to be a business student, and he like talks back to his professor once, and his professor gives him an F
Yes.
on the spot for talking back to him.
His cartoonish stick in the mud professor, who all but he's like a Three Stooges character. I had better not see these pies leave this windowsill. Mr. Cruise, you'll never succeed in business. Mark my words.
And Tom goes straight for the throat.
Yeah.
Delivering the "those who can't do teach" line in the way.
He quotes Annie Hall.
Yeah. there's a lot of moments, and this is probably the tamest example of the many moments that seemingly just come out of nowhere and are totally random. I don't think we've really addressed how bizarre the tonal
hmm
shifts are. And this is spoiler territory now, of course, but in some of the early scenes where Tom's working the bar, he gets a lot of these like looks
hmm
by the women at the bar, and eventually he kind of like hooks up with one, and there's this one very goofy sex scene, and then like the following day he's like getting really excited about this
Yeah.
girl, and as though it's going to be something real, when there's been no interaction of
hmm
substance between him and this girl. And the next night at the bar, the girl comes in and starts making out with his kung fu master, as Zach
With
calls
Mr.
him.
Miyagi.
Yeah. and um and it just keeps spiraling from there. Then we get the Kokomo transition,
Yes,
which
the best part of the
I
movie.
think Zach enjoyed. Yes, there's a lot of needle drops of really good songs in really strange ways. um yeah, it's a one, but for as much as we've talked about bad movies, especially in this season, I still feel like this tickles an itch of a particular bad movie subgenre
Yeah.
that we haven't quite touched on yet this season.
You know what this is? It's an and everyone clapped story. There are so many scenes in this movie that feel like long, rambling YouTube comments, which are like, yeah, my teacher was once being really rude to a girl behind me in class, and I stood up and I said, you can't do that, man, and everyone clapped. Yeah, I was tending bar once, and I stood up and I delivered a stupid poem on the bar, and everyone clapped. And it feels like the insecure, like, recitation of a man who's, like, correcting all the faults of his life, of his young life.
I'm like, so I felt like every scene was like you're taking a nap for 20 minutes and then you wake up 3 hours later and it's dark outside and you're really confused about what's happening. Every single scene was exactly like that. And it's that when I said like no continuity, I will give the film some credit. At least he like goes back to the same location twice and eventually has that weird food thing with Elizabeth Shue, with Jordan, who just assaults him with food. I actually wrote this is would be
Oh,
a
yes,
perfect rundown film, by the way. I was
Oh,
really
yeah.
sad to not have the rundown, so if you would permit me a couple minutes, I have a couple
Sure.
quotes that are that will emphasize how insane the script actually is.
Mhm.
There is nothing inanimate about Coral. Poking your head outside for like 10 seconds. You'll get pneumonia. It's been an adventure after doing almost nothing. Mrs. Rivkin has spent the last 20 years burning her husband's dinners, but now decides she wants to become the Donald Trump of the cookie business.
Oh, yeah.
Coughlin's Law, anything else is always something better. Beer, my kind of woman. Stop molesting my customers. Miss, we have theater tickets.
There's a Letterboxd user I really like called Will Sloan, who he compared this in his review. He says that this is a Tom Cruise movie that feels like the average Elvis movie, where Elvis kind of started out wanting to be like a real actor and a real performer, and he got maybe 2 or 3 movies where he gives like real performances. And then his management kind of took over, and all these Elvis movies sort of just become fluffy, nothing movies where he just clearly is going on vacation somewhere to have fun for about an hour and a half, and then they get in and get out. And this kind of feels like that, but it's so desperate to be taken seriously too. Where bartending is this martial art that you need to be taught, but it's dangerous, man. If you're in it for too long, it's gonna swallow you whole, and you're gonna get stuck behind the bar, and it's gonna consume you, man. And I just don't believe that bartending is that cool or that dangerous or that funny or anything. Like I have to believe that the earliest version of the screenplay, where it was about a man in his late 30s who feels stuck in life, who's wondering where he's going to go next, and the bar is sort of this representation of him being stuck, and he meets all these other people who have aspirations and are stuck. Like, to me, that feels like a character drama that could really work. But when they, strip all that out to make it a sexy Tom Cruise neon soaked uh romance, I don't really know how to categorize this movie. Part of me wanted to call it an action movie, but it's definitely not. Like, just all that sort of middle-aged malaise substance is just gone. You can't do that. The sort of turning point of the movie is meant to be because in Jamaica he meets Elizabeth Shue and they really get along, and they have sex in a public waterway, and then he's essentially dared by Brian Brown to sleep with this rich woman at the bar, and he does, and she's really into it and essentially makes him into like her kept pool boy, and takes him back to New York with her, and he's clearly like not really into it, but he stays with her, hoping that he can get a leg up in the business because of it. And the turning point of the movie is meant to be him going, what am I doing? I had this wonderful woman I abandoned. I betrayed her. She hates me. I need to beg for her forgiveness and tell her the truth. And the movie acts as if he tells her the truth, but he really doesn't. He says that he like got cold feet and but he didn't. He like flagrantly disregarded their relationship for a bet.
Well, he also doesn't say sorry in any way, and the way when Elizabeth Shue brings up the issue of him cheating on her with that woman, Tom Cruise's justification is, well, Elizabeth Shue, when one of the guys dares you to do
Yes!
it, you gotta do
He's
it.
like, babe, the bro code. And then he doesn't apologize for that excuse. Like,
Yeah.
and the movie, I think it's, how do I say this? I think this movie does feel, I'm not sure of the exact years of Reagan's presidency, but this movie feels really, really Reagan. It's not the focus. It's not like Wall Street, but just the way that the characters talk to each other and think about money and are just like after money feels so of that era. So at the end, for instance, when uh, uh, Elizabeth Shue's father is like, here's a check for $10,000, Tom Cruise. Leave New York and never come back. Never speak to my daughter again. And then she comes in and they have a big argument. And then he tears the check up in both of their faces. And he makes a big show of it. Here you go. I'm tearing the check up. Look at me doing this good and honorable thing to prove myself to you. And it comes off as so fake and phony. But when that money is what you as a viewer are meant to go, no, why would Tom Cruise throw away the money like that? I think that's meant to come across as genuine. When I think by any other perspective, the way you would do that is he tears up the money when he doesn't have something to prove to Elizabeth Shue in front of her face, and she witnesses it or hears it about it indirectly, and that indicates to her, oh my goodness, he has changed. Look how much he cares about me. But the fact that he's like right in her nose going, see how much I care about you as I tear up this check? Aren't you impressed by me? Goodbye. Like, it feels so phony.
Yeah, I don't even know how to analyze that in a conventional way, because at that point in the movie, it's just jumped the ship already. I guess if I was viewing this as a conventionally invested viewer, I might suspect that I'm rooting for some sort of romantic reconciliation. I don't know that I would be mourning the check, but it certainly plays as phony. And as long as we're still adjacent to the absurd happenings, I think the one that offends the sensibilities the most is probably when Tom returns to his buddy's boat and finds him brutally suicided with a broken bottle.
Oh, with a broken bottle. Okay. The slight hint of like a silver lining in this movie for me was Brian Brown, because I think he's a good actor. I think he plays that character well. And to me, his character represents maybe some inkling of what this movie could have been, like what this movie could have discussed and been about and been interesting because he feels like a real adult. He feels like a character that's seen things and has this cynical kind of outlook. And I think if we had a more mature, just interesting character for him to play off of, uh, that would have had some kind of a mirror. We would have seen something from this other actor because of the stuff that Brian Brown is outputting. But as it is, I don't think that the movie really knows what to do with that character. Like he's framed as like this betrayed, he betrayed Tom Cruise. His mentor has turned his back on him. Uh, Obi-Wan killed Luke's father as in the original script. How could this have been? The master has become the ultimate villain, and that sets us up for there to be some kind of like rivalry between them in the third act. And I'm not speaking in praise of like the formula or anything, but that would be somewhere to go. Oh, in Jamaica, they're rivals, and Brian Brown is trying to sabotage Tom Cruise at every turn. And then in the third act, Brian Brown goes, "I challenge you to a bartending contest, Brian." And they throw the bottles around, and Tom Cruise throws the bottles around so much that he beats Brian Brown. And Brian Brown, with a wink and a smirk, has to go, "Yeah, you're all right, kid." And that's the conclusion. The student has defeated the master who betrayed him, and progress, narrative, structure. And as it is, he just kind of disappears and then shows up and he's like, "I lost all my money on the bar," and then he kills himself.
It's weird that it feels like Brian Brown is just kind of following Tom Cruise
Yes.
and popping up places. And which, if we were following this competitive structure, the idea would be that Cruise is following or chasing him.
Mhm.
So it's constantly at odds with itself.
And if they did something with that, like if Brian Brown showed up in what I think a logical viewer would think when Brian Brown shows up in Jamaica is, oh, he heard about Tom Cruise's bartending prowess, and he decided he has to knock that kid down a peg or two. And so he comes down to challenge him or something, and he's like, "No, I'm just on vacation with my wife." Also, why do they do away with Coral? Why is Coral not the woman that he's
Yeah.
married to? And then the fact that at the end Brian Brown's wife is like, "Oh, sleep with me, Tom Cruise." That would have some actual impact because this is the woman that Brian Brown stole from him at the beginning of the movie, and now she's trying to get back with Tom Cruise. This would be a temptation, and he goes, "No. I've got a real woman in my life that I love. I have a love in my life that makes me more powerful than you could possibly believe." But no, it's just some other. Coral is just like doesn't matter at all.
When the line "there's nothing inanimate about Coral" happens, I thought that it's just so bad. I thought that he was going to say, "Well, actually, Brian Brown, Coral is a living thing," which is true, by the way. But
Mhm.
I think I was expecting a bit too much intelligence
Yeah.
from this movie.
Well, please. Tom Cruise is a cool guy. He's not a lame-o nerd. He doesn't know about coral. He doesn't need to know about marine biology because he's cool. Have you saw him serve that daiquiri earlier? That's a cool guy. And maybe I'm giving too much credit to what this movie could have been, what this movie was meant to be, or whatever. But I feel like so much of why the scenes don't work to me, it feels like because they've been rewritten on the fly as like flirty, youthful scenes. When reading that this was meant to be like a middle-age, like malaise movie, I can see that movie in my head. I can see that movie working. Mid-70s, Elliot Gould plays Brian. Maybe Brian Brown's role is like Jack Nicholson or something. And it's these two guys out on the town. They're kind of rogues, but they're making a mess of their lives. And Elliot Gould knows they got to go somewhere. And I can see there being real impact in like, oh my God, my buddy, my mentor, my guy who was we did everything. We went through everything together. He's killed himself because this lifestyle is not, it's not going anywhere for us. I can see that having real impact, but turning it into like this I don't know, this like I'm tempted to call it like a teen movie because it feels like it's for like young people, but I mean, it's rated R. I guess a lot of rated R movies in the 80s were kind of designed for teens, though. I don't know, trying to kind of make it into this youthful, up and coming of age story, I think probably robbed it of a lot of its meaning.
You know what it reminds me of? I have no experience with this, but I've gotten YouTube ads for those, like, I think they're called micro dramas or like TikTok
Oh,
dramas,
sure.
where I get like the 5 second ad where it's like, my younger sister stabbed my eyes out with the scissors because she hated me or something, and
Yeah.
then I hit the skip button. Um, it's kind of like that. The just absolutely
hmm
bizarre swings that are really just there for shock value, and you never know the characters as people.
hmm
I guess if you were into that sort of thing, which I think we would all agree is kind of base and crude and not what we look for in the
hmm
movies, um, that's there. And I also persist that across our three leads, I think they're giving at least decent to passable
hmm
performances, um, for being such broad caricatures. I mean, comparing them to other multiple Razzie Award winners, I feel pretty confident that Tom Cruise in this is a lot more into it than like Dakota Johnson in Madam
hmm
Web or something like that.
Mike Lindell in in his anti-vaxxer movie. I was talking about this with my coworkers earlier today, actually. Do you guys remember Quibi?
Oh yeah,
This feels like a movie that would kill on Quibi.
Mitchell's face.
Quibi, it was born and died in about 2020, I think. And the idea was it was kind of before its time, I guess, in a certain respect, because
Yeah,
the idea of Quibi was it was a streaming service where everything on it had shows, it had movies, but everything was divided up into 5-minute little quick bites, hence Quibi. And the idea was this is a streaming service when you're on the go. You're on the metro on the way to work, you're waiting for a table at a restaurant, you're on a ferry or I don't know, but you have a quick awkward little period of time. You can't watch a full movie, you can't watch an episode of a TV show even. Uh, and by the time you've searched through YouTube to find something, the time is over. So why not pull up a Quibi and you can watch 5 minutes of a movie or a TV show or whatever, and then put it down and you can come back to that or watch a different thing next time or whatever. Um, and then of course Quibi launched kind of right as the pandemic started, and so everybody was stuck at home. Nobody's traveling, nobody's experiencing these quick little bites of time. So it kind of flopped immediately. Now, of course, we watch everything in quick little bites on the internet, whether we have quick little bites of time or not. But this feels like you could re-edit this for Quibi, and it would probably do okay because every beat in this movie is about 2 to 3 minutes long, and it almost feels like it almost feels like an adaptation of like a story that was like written in one scene installments in like a magazine or something like that. This in this issue of Cocktail, Tom Cruise is studying at the bar. In the next issue of Cocktail, Tom Cruise has an argument with his teacher. In the next issue of Cocktail, Tom Cruise goes to Jamaica, and it's just these individual little snippets of story that you could string together, and now you get a movie. Yeah, this is kind of like if an alien with a head injury watched The Color of Money and decided they wanted to make a movie just like that. Disney Touchstone is owned by Disney. This is a Disney movie.
I wonder. That makes me wonder because circling back to Quibi, that was spearheaded by Jeffrey Katzenberg,
Yes.
who was a Disney executive
hmm
in the 80s and worked on most of the major animated
hmm
movies under, gosh, what's his face?
Oh,
The
Michael Eisner?
CEO.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. And they broke up because he left Disney rather because him and Eisner were kind of getting petty about who was getting the credit for their victories. Um, I wonder if Katzenberg had anything to do with Cocktail, because that would be
That
hilarious.
would there'd be some consistency there too. Uh,
Yeah.
if that's his real idea of like people want to be entertained in short bursts. When I say this is signature of the Reagan era, I'm not necessarily saying that the people who made this were like, we really love Ronald Reagan and Reaganomics, and we want to make a movie that says Reaganomics to the people of America. I just think it's indicative of kind of the overwhelming greed of that era in the way that people kind of talk about and interact with money in this movie.
I think my stance on the Reagan era thing is, as is often the case on the pod, maybe we're saying the same thing in different words, but I think that I'm remembering what Zach said maybe episodes ago about how everything old is new again. I think you were talking about something on Week in Review, how it reminded you of today's current event
Right, yeah.
storm. And I think the whole like grind set mentality, like you can do anything through this like
Mhm.
masculine confidence, man. And it just felt like I was watching some toxic
Yeah.
YouTuber or something, or
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, Manosphere adjacent. It even like reminded me of Marty Supreme. I think it's fair to say,
Yeah.
in some broad strokes, just the whole like ambition and nothing else angle. And the every like money just being at the forefront. Maybe
Mhm.
this is just a consequence of being a burgeoning adult now, but I feel like people still think about money
Mhm.
and talk about money like all the time. And maybe that's just a America period
Mhm.
thing more than it is a Reagan era thing.
Well, is it
Cocktail.
last call? Is it time to wrap it up? It's Week in Review now. What are we talking about on Week in Review?
I have no clue, so one of you have to go.
Okay. Well, I am going to talk about music today. It hasn't happened often this season of the podcast, but I've been re-listening to my CD collection as I've been driving to and from work lately, and I recently started re-listening to Pandora's Box, the collection set from Aerosmith. Now, for better or for worst, or for worse, I am an Aerosmith fan. And if anybody does not know the sort of history of Aerosmith, um, they were a rock band in the early 70s through the 80s, very influenced by sort of like barroom blues. They were signed to Columbia Record, but eventually they sort of self-destructed on that album deal due to drug use and a lot of toxic personalities. And in the mid to late 80s, they had a major comeback. They signed with Geffen Records, and most of the Aerosmith records that you hear, and most of the Aerosmith songs you hear on the radio now, are going to be from that comeback era. Songs like Dude Looks Like a Lady, Crazy, Angel, of course, Janie's Got a Gun, which in senior year of high school was like a tick for me. That was anytime I wasn't speaking, I was humming that under my
Oh
breath.
yeah.
Um, and during this
I
major
remember.
comeback, Columbia released Pandora's Box, sort of to ride the coattails of their comeback, which is a collection set of all of their best tracks from their era with Columbia Records, including a lot of deep cuts, unreleased tracks, rehearsal tracks, live recordings, stuff that you previous to this would not have heard from the band on any official records. And it's really really interesting to listen to this stuff in hindsight, whether the set was a blatant cash in or not. I think you could definitely make an argument that it was. It's a lot of fun to hear stuff from very very early on in the band's career. I like the Geffen Records stuff from Aerosmith, but I do think the Columbia Records stuff feels so much more genuine. And maybe it's a silly thing to say in connection to Aerosmith, but it feels so much more uh, artistic and as if they are the ones actively in the driver's seat of their own music and their own careers. Even if they were using so much drugs, they barely even remember half of the period. With Geffen, they worked with a lot of outside songwriters, and they very much feel like a singles group that is being created as a personality for movies and TV and the radio. This is the era where Steven Tyler was on American Idol. Rock and Roller Coaster was constructed at Disney World with them as the faces of the ride. They released Don't Want to Miss a Thing for the Armageddon soundtrack. But the Columbia Records era,
Wow.
it feels like these are guys who genuinely love this genre and they want to make good music. And it's especially, I think, enlightening to hear a lot of these really early live tracks on Volume 1, which are essentially recorded as like demos before they necessarily were even signed to a label. They do a cover of Rattlesnake Shake, the early Fleetwood Mac song, which is clearly recorded in like a scuzzy dive bar with maybe 20 people in it, based on the applause that you can hear on the track. And I do think it kind of opens your eyes to a version of this band that especially a lot of people, young people, I think, will not be aware of, as these young, hungry guys who are after this sound and want to make really good music. And I think they succeed. It's also interesting on the later volumes to hear them making much worse music and performing in smaller venues, not by choice, but because they can't sell the bigger venues out anymore. And Steven Tyler's voice is in shreds, and I can see people saying that this is, maybe people will say this is a collection of leftovers and table scraps that have been shoved out to make a buck now that the band is big again. But I think it makes, if you are a fan, I think it makes for a really interesting portrait of kind of the rise and fall of the band in its earliest stage. So I think based on the way I've described it, you'll know whether or not it's something you want to listen to. But I recommend Pandora's Box from Aerosmith.
That was among the more tolerable and enlightening Zach Music Week in Reviews.
There we go.
Did you know that they've been evicted by the Muppets recently?
Yes, I did know that. And frankly, I do think it's time. I think it was time a long time ago, frankly. I mean, I have this argument with my mom and my sister
We'll tell you in a
a
second.
lot. But young people haven't known who Aerosmith are for probably about 20 years. It's debatable whether young people knew who they were when they became the face of Rock and Roller Coaster in the first place. I think it's a better idea to make the Electric Mayhem a group that is not going to age and get old and have drug problems and issues with their feet where they fall off the stage all the time and can't tour anymore. They are. It's better to make that the face of an amusement park ride than a band of people who will inevitably get too old to rock and die eventually.
Mitchell, the Muppets are replacing Aerosmith at the
Yeah.
Rock and Roller Coaster in Disney World. But I'll talk about music too. What the hell?
Okay.
I'm on a bit of an exploration kick, as I think I alluded to last week. I'm starting to listen to some Japanese city pop, which is a particular blend of J-pop in the mostly early 80s, with some like funk jazz influences, some R&B in there. I've gotten a few CDs, primarily listening to Tatsuro Yamashita, who is known, I guess, as the king of city pop. I've listened to a couple verbose YouTube video essays and pretty much nothing else, so you'll have to bear with me. But I'm really enjoying his music, particularly his album Melodies, which I guess sort of has a Mariah Carey effect in Japan, because he has a track on there, a Christmas track, that gets really high on the charts every year and just sells and streams like hotcakes. Some of the other tracks on that album strike me more. The first two tracks are very interesting. The second in particular has these really stacked vocal harmonies that are very dense and complex and remind me of the Beach Boys quite a bit. And then track 4 is a cover of an obscure song written by Brian Wilson called Guess I'm Dumb, which I had no knowledge of the original version, or that Brian wrote it. But he wrote it in 1964, and it was basically rejected by his bandmates. But if you listen to it, it's fascinating, and I think it's sort of the earliest example of this sort of lyrical and tonal darkness that we started to hear a lot more of in Rubber Soul and Pet Sounds and what Bob Dylan was doing. But to me, this is like the earliest prominent example of that kind of song. And to learn that it was kind of shunned by the Beach Boys, it was recorded by Glenn Campbell, who replaced Brian as the touring member of the Beach Boys when Brian stopped touring. And that recording's very nice, but Tatsuro Yamashita's cover is great too, and it's the original lyrics in English and everything. But yeah, Japanese city pop, man, I'm loving it. It's very fresh. It's musically interesting. I don't understand the lyrics 98% of the time because it's mostly Japanese, but I find that there's plenty to take away from it without the lyrics. And the odd song that I did take the trouble to translate touched me quite a bit. One of Yamashita's songs called Jody is like this very it's very high in his vocal range, and you get the sense, okay, he's singing about a girl. And you translate it, and he's kind of singing about this lover he'll never see again. And it struck a chord with me, man. He's a great musician, and yeah, this is going to be a thing for me now. So yeah.
Christian's transformation into our resident weeb is very nearly complete.
Yes, it's happening.
Well, I guess we don't have a prompt to draw or anything to tease for next time because, somewhat surprisingly, we're through with the prompts. We didn't quite realize until last time, but this is the 24th movie we've discussed this season. So that next episode will be our last episode of the season. We'll be doing kind of a season recap, a discussion of Game of the Game amongst other things. We'll probably go down other avenues. We always do. And then after that, we'll be on a break for a while, and who knows? We'll talk about it more next time.
Yeah. Thanks for sticking with us. I kind of don't realize how long we've been doing this until one of you reminds me at the beginning of an episode, but it's wild.
It's true. All 6 of our loyal listeners, you know who you are, and we appreciate you.
We
Mom.
do.
The game of the game of the game of the game of the game.